right, everybody, welcome back. Okay, we have two more presentations for you guys. So let me go ahead and introduce Robin Berthier, who is the CEO of Network Perception. So he's going to be discussing how to verify perimeter defenses with OT network visibility. Okay, Robin, all yours.
Great, thank you, Justin. Welcome everyone to our presentation. We've heard great talks today. So I want to show a slightly different angle on the issue of perimeter defense and network segmentation. I'm really excited to present today about network visibility and verification. And thanks to SANS for organizing this event. It's always a pleasure to present at SANS and connect with the community. So my name is Robin Berthier. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Network Perception. There we go. And at Network Perception, we design and develop software solutions to address the needs of critical infrastructure cybersecurity. We're all concerned with the sharp increase in number of attacks, and we are in this community because we know that the work we do have a real societal impact in the realm of OT environments. When a cyber attack hit, then infrastructure can stop. And we've seen that vividly this year with different high profile breaches. One of the biggest one with the Colonial Pipeline, where estimated 13.5 million barrels of refined oil were not couldn't be delivered because of a 5-day shutdown due to a ransomware. And if we zoom out and look at the trend in terms of ransomware specifically against critical infrastructure over the past few years, we see like this sharp increase, like close to 500% just over the past 3 years. If we zoom in and look at some examples of high-profile attacks, December 2020, we had the SolarWinds breach, in which the SolarWinds Orion application was compromised, and then through a patch update that was shared with 18,000 customers. And that meant that inside the network of those customers, there was a foothold to penetrate and extend privileges into different zones of those customer networks, getting to an Active Directory in order to be able to have unlimited access to authentication and different services, and then exfiltrating data or sitting there and observing the network for a long time. Looking at the different vulnerabilities that this attack involved, the first one is the supply chain risk, and that's an area of focus nowadays. A lot of work is being done to really understand that risk. There are different regulations. For example, in the NERC environment, we have CIP 13 pushing for a plan and the management of vendors we introduce into our organization. And then once the compromise is inside the network, risk and vulnerabilities around what we call overly permissive accesses. And that meant that if you have SolarWinds and you were compromised, then that malware could then do lateral movement, go through different zones of the network, because firewalls were not correctly segmenting your network into the proper partitions. And then even at the end, once we have the exfiltration of data, again, overly permissive access would allow an attacker to send data, and often we see a lack of outbound connectivity restriction into most organization networks. Ransomware attacks have been actually getting more and more sophisticated. This concept of lateral movement is not only with the supply chain, but also with ransomware. We're seeing a lot of examples of attackers getting a first initial foothold for either a phishing attack, a vulnerability, or some edge device, and then going through that lateral movement, getting to an Active Directory, and then using that to penetrate further, either into the corporate network or also into the OT network. So in the words of Rob Joyce, if you really want to protect your network, you really have to know your network. Rob Joyce was the former chief of the offensive team team at NSA. And in this video that I encourage everyone to watch from the Enigma Usenix conference a few years back, he explained for the first time the way that his team was actually attacking third-party networks. And it boils down to getting to know that target network better than the owners of the network itself. And that would sometimes take months or years, but that knowledge of how things are partitioned, how the different security solutions are put in place, and what vulnerabilities and what changes are occurring over time is really the key to be able to attack, but also to, of course, defend a network. It's a huge realization nowadays of our dependencies on cyber systems, especially in the industrial control system operation. 20 years back, we could run our OT environment without any connectivity to the rest of the network. Nowadays, that's becoming impossible for efficiency reasons. And so attackers, they know that, and that's why they are targeting specifically those mission critical assets, the cyber systems on which our critical operations are depending, because they know that this will increase our, their likelihood of getting a ransom paid or shutting down our businesses. So key questions we have to ask ourselves is on which cyber systems do our critical operations depend? How are those systems connected and how are the communications controlled? And how can we increase resiliency in our environment moving forward? This concept of resiliency is extremely important because we're all realizing that it's not a if we'll get compromised, but more like a when we'll get compromised. And the solution with the level of sophistication of cyber attacks we have today is really to invest in cyber resiliency, to be able to keep operations running despite being under threat. There's great work being done on the theme of cyber resiliency, including work by NIST around defining the building blocks that will allow you to invest in the right area to make your network and your environment more secure and also resilient to those cyber attacks. So they have those building blocks organized into 4 buckets. Initially, the visibility and understanding, then defense in depth, adopting and applying the principle of least privilege, and then being able to recover and respond much faster than we can do today. So for this presentation, I'd like to focus on 2 of those building blocks. First is the dynamic representation. How can we visualize our network environment despite the environment being under frequent changes or despite new vulnerabilities being discovered? And then second, the building block of segmentation. So how can we clearly separate different level of criticalities and make sure that around our mission critical assets, we have the right set of segments in order to prevent an attack from propagating through lateral movement and impacting the asset on which our operations are dependent. So why investing in network visibility? Well, as we just said, number 1 is knowing your network, right? You want to make sure that you have that in-depth understanding of assets, how they're connected, how your network is configured, and what security solutions you have deployed today. You can only defend what you know extremely well. And number 2, eliminating blind spot. You don't want to have surprises. You want to make sure that you understand your attack surface. And this attack surface is changing on pretty much a daily basis. This adoption of IoT devices, adoption of some cloud solutions. You need to be, through visibility, aware of those different corners of the network that are changing and remove any chance of a blind spot. And then third, being able to make informed decisions in case of if a breach happened, or just in case you want to invest in the right set of security solutions. And making informed decision means to be able to contextualize the different events or data that you're receiving, and to be able to understand both the big picture as well as the details of the different security solutions that you have. And that ability to zoom in and out of your infrastructure and to really have that comprehensive understanding is a really core value of getting the right set of network visibility capabilities. What's in scope of network visibility? Well, first, you have the activity on the network. That means the endpoints, your different assets, equipment, servers, workstations, they are all communicating, and you want to have an eye on those communications. You want to be able to listen to the traffic, dissect protocols, and make sure that those conversations are legitimate, so that if something is outside of the normal bound, then you want to detect it right away. That's actually an area where in OT environment, you have an advantage because communications are much more predictable than in the IT side of the house. In IT, you have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of protocols, and sometimes millions of applications. So this is a very noisy network traffic. On the OT side, you have, for example, through SCADA, a very predictive set of communications happening at a set time with the exact packet length, for example, and you can use that predictability to be able to clearly separate normal traffic from suspicious traffic. Another important and very complementary aspect of network visibility is to know your network architecture. Like how are your firewalls, routers, and switches actually allowing traffic to flow from the different zones? What rules, what policies are enabled and permitting specific ports, specific IP addresses to communicate? And what's the topology of your environment? Like how is your environment controlled and configured? And then the third aspect of visibility would be the threats and vulnerabilities. So threats are more like outward facing, what's happening in the world that could impact your organization in terms of new attack techniques, new attack trends. And then vulnerabilities, both outward and inward facing, like which assets could be exploited inside your organization, which new vulnerabilities have been discovered, and what's in scope in which that you have deployed. So today we've heard great presentation and great solution on category number 1 and 3 there, network activity and threat and vulnerabilities. For the rest of this presentation, I really want to focus on the network architecture view, because it's often an aspect of network visibility that's not taken into account with the right level of depth. And so I really want to emphasize the importance of looking at those two sides of the coin. You have the actual traffic flowing through the network, but you also want to know the architecture through your devices, through the firewalls, routers, and switches. And that understanding of your topology will allow you to contextualize those communications, as well as understanding if which vulnerabilities could be exploited or not. So there are specific challenges for the OT environment, actually, that makes the understanding of network topology a must-have. First, you have often quite a few legacy equipment, and that means that those legacy equipment may not support the installation of an agent or sensor, and that would limit your ability to actually deploy agents to be able to understand your active network traffic. Second, often those OT environments have devices that are geographically dispersed, large volume of substations, for example, or a large number of IoT devices. And that means that being able to instrument those different networks for getting visibility is extremely expensive. And then third, OT has requirements around the availability of assets and some requirements around guaranteed quality of service and timing for network packets to arrive. And that means that it's preventing a lot of active scanning activity that we are seeing in the IT side of the network. So for those three reasons, it's another layer of importance around the need to understand your network architecture and your topology without having to deploy anything inside your OT network, or without having to increase your attack surface. To understand the topology and to understand those access policies, you have different ways to go about it. And I want to show you first a manual way before looking at the automated way. This is an example of a Cisco ASA configuration. We see it's a short config, about 50 lines. It's a ASA version 9.8. At the top, we have the name of our firewall, the host name. We have then a block to define 3 interfaces, then a block to define 4 access list rules that are permitting traffic or denying traffic, so the keywords permit or deny. And then we have a binding block, which is connecting those different rules to the interfaces. So through that configuration, the ASA firewall will understand how to handle traffic arriving through the different interfaces and what to do about it. If it's matching an IP address or a specific port, then the rule will apply and the traffic will either be permitted or denied. In this example, we have 3 communications that are permitted on port 80, and then everything else is denied. We have a blanket deny any at the end of our access list. So looking at those configurations by hand is extremely tedious and complex. And more importantly, if you look at them manually, you may actually miss stuff. It's near impossible for a human to understand that type of programming language and being able to make sense of it. And so that's where we need the help of technology and automation. And actually, to illustrate that, I have a small, short quiz for everyone here. Is another example of a set of access lists from the Cisco device. And I have 3 questions. And if you're able to answer those 3 questions correctly in the Slack channel, we have some prizes for you. So I'll leave this slide for 1 minute. If you can answer correctly 1, 2, and 3 there, and I'll give an answer in a minute. For those who are not familiar with the format of a Cisco access list, you have first a keyword defining if it's a permit or deny rule, followed by the protocol, so TCP, ICMP, UDP, followed by the source host or a source network. In this case, we have host definitions with IP addresses, followed by the destination, and then followed by a port number. So 80 would be a port number, 22 for SSH, 4434 for HTTPS. All right, so let's see who got those 3 questions correct. First one, can 192.0.2.10 initiate an SSH connection? The answer is yes, because line number 2 here allows traffic from the source IP 192.0.2.10 on port 22 to that destination. So we can answer yes in this example. The second question is syslog traffic blocked on the inside interface. So we first have to look our inside interface, which is defined at the bottom here. Then I have to look which access list is connected to that interface. That's the binding block. So we have here a name of an access list, access inside in. So if we could look back up, access inside in would be the first 7 rows. And then we see that row in the middle highlighted in green. And indeed, syslog, which is port 514, is allowed on the inside interface. And then the third question, can 198.51.100.10 send traffic to the outside interface? The answer is no, because despite having a permit rule, like we could think this traffic is allowed, right? We have a permit rule there allowing traffic from 198.51.100.10 to any, but we're missing a binding. There is no access group that are binding this access list to an interface, which means that the Cisco firewall will completely ignore that access list, and that traffic won't be enabled. So those are the types of misconfigurations that can be very easy to overlook, and that's where we need to improve the way we review those policies. And it's one thing actually to take a look at a single configuration, but often in a network you have an access policy that's distributed over 20, 50, or 100 different firewalls. You need to be able to understand globally how that policy is implemented and whether this distributed set of access lists is making sense, or whether you have gaps in terms of your network access or gaps in terms of communication traffic control. So there's a better way. And so what I want to demonstrate and show you today is a solution that fits right into what we call the zero trust network monitoring. And it's zero trust because it's completely read-only. Unlike solutions such as SolarWinds, there's no need to have writing permissions into your infrastructure. So you don't need to allow that application to make any change into your firewalls. And also, it can actually be deployed without direct connection to your devices. Like you can rely on an existing config file management system or a backup system. If you're backing up your firewall device config every night, or rather configure switch configure on a nightly basis, you can connect this type of network analysis solution, read-only network analysis solution, to that backup system. This allows you to gain that visibility over your network architecture without the need to open yet another access into your OT network. And that's extremely important because with this approach, you don't increase your attack surface in any way. And you really have separation of duty between your networking team, security team, and compliance team. You can produce the verification report. You can gain that understanding on how your architecture is configured, but you're not having to deploy agents or sensors or anything that would modify or change your OT network in any way. So the goal there is to be able to ingest those configuration, have a view of your different access rule tables. I have an example here in the top left with a set of rules from a couple of devices, and then turning those rules and turning the understanding we gain from looking at configurations into a visual topology. So knowing how the traffic can flow and knowing where different assets are located and how they are protected. So I want to show now a step-by-step approach on how to deploy that type of solution and how to go after gaining that visibility over your network architecture. So step one, collecting the raw network configuration files, and those mostly are from your firewalls, routers, and managed layer 3 switches. In addition, that's optional, but that allows you to gain a better view of your endpoints. You can connect the ARP tables from your switches that will give you the list of connected assets when you at the time of collection. And then in addition, also optional, but enriching your map, you can import reports from your favorite vulnerability scanner that you run either passively or actively through your environment. Step two, creating that up-to-date network topology diagram of your environment. And from this visual topology, we can label which are our critical assets, which zones need to be protected, which equipment is really having a dependency on the correct operations of our organization. And then this will allow also to understand in context where the vulnerabilities are located, and then to be able to do path analysis because of this ability to understand the different configuration files of firewalls. We can build a model of our network and we can analyze the possible path. And then you can first make sure that your network segmentation is correct. And then second, add context and verify whether your defense in depth strategy around your critical assets is correct or not. And then finally, step three, documenting your gaps in terms of cybersecurity. So it's a iterative process where you want to, over time, improve your resiliency, improve your ability to protect, detect, and respond. And so this is, of course, the first in many steps to get to that point. So I want to show you some screenshots of an application that we have called NP Live, in which we automate that process. And I want to show that through an example of a network with two zones. We have a IT network on the left, an OT environment on the right. We assume there's some firewalls actually inside the IT network at the boundary between IT and OT, and also inside the OT network. And then the IT network also has firewalling to control access to the outside world, either a larger wide area network or directly the internet. So first step, collecting the raw data. We would instrument NP-Live to connect to your config file management system or your backup system to collect automatically and continuously the latest version of the configuration files of your firewalls, routers, and switches, as well as those op tables and potential vulnerability reports if you have any. Once you have those configuration imported into NP-Live, instantly it will show this visual map. So this map was actually built automatically by the application. And you can see it shows clearly the different zones with different colors to indicate the criticality. So we have our outside zone, again, IT, a DMZ in the middle, and then the OT side on the right. We have two firewalls imported, an ESP firewall on the right and an internet firewall on the left. The blue clouds are showing your layer 3 subnets, or in this case, we have 1.2.3.4/24 networks. And then your endpoints will be shown with those icons here, and those can be workstations, servers, or OT equipment. And around those endpoints, we have some highlights that indicates the criticality of those pieces of equipment. So first step, once you have the config files imported, visualizing, understanding the different zones in your network, the different segments. Second step, to make sure that you understand also the criticality of your equipment. So having those highlights to see where are your mission critical assets. This will help you then during your review, make sure you have defense in depth and correct proper segmentation. Step 3, if you have a vulnerability scan reports, to be able to import that and augment the map with those vulnerability information. In this example, we have 3 servers that have vulnerability discovered, 2 Active Directory, and a jump host. And you can see the CD number for those vulnerabilities under each host. And then the next step is to leverage the modeling that NP-Live can do around the configuration file of each of the devices to understand the path. And that means to be able to visualize which IP address can connect to which other IP address on which ports and services. It will be a communication pathway analysis that will allow you to really understand what traffic is allowed and how your firewalls controlling that traffic. In this visualization here, it's an example of a stepping stone map in which we selected one target in the top right corner. It's an Active Directory server inside the OT network. And the map is showing nodes that can directly connect to this target in red, and the one that will be one stepping stone away in orange. And that means that if one of those IT hosts gets compromised, then the possibility of lateral movement based on those rule sets that we have today is available for attackers in one step, which means they can connect from this compromised host on the left to the DMZ, compromising the red node, and then reaching that target, exploiting the CVE to then penetrate inside the OT network. Those types of stepping stones are really instrumental in connecting the different paths that you can analyze through the modeling, and then making sure that your network segmentation has potential gaps, or whether you can strengthen it to further isolate and only allow the traffic that on need-to-know basis, only allow the traffic that really are needed. And if you have interactive traffic, to actually be able to separate and have it for going to jump host. This allows you also to simulate attack graphs, which means that you can step-by-step understand how an attacker can do that lateral movement based on those different layers of information, right? We have the topology, we have the vulnerabilities, we have the path analysis, and then we have the criticality and the zones. Once it's is complete, you can document your gaps. You can do that through here an example of the connectivity matrix that's automatically produced by NP Live, in which you can see ports available and accessible through each pair of interface, and then the vulnerability exposure and the attack scenario that I was showing earlier. Before concluding, I want to also mention that you can leverage your compliance framework to improve your network verification and visibility operations. An example here with NERC SIP for power utilities, where NERC defines the concept of an electronic security perimeter, ESP, and they have different requirements that I'm listing here below that will really force you to have that separation between what's critical and what's not critical, and then also being able to separate the system-to-system communication from your interactive communication. And that can be a framework that you can leverage again in different environments, applying those rules to make your segmentation more robust. So in terms of next steps, I invite you to engage first in a conversation with your team about this concept of cyber resiliency. So key questions, which cyber systems do your critical operations depend, and how are those systems connected, and how are communications controlled? Like, which are the trusted data flow that we absolutely need, and which are the data flow that could be either limited or eliminated. And then second, adopting this zero trust monitoring solution, so modern network segmentation verification process, in which you can automatically collect the latest version of your firewall, router, and switch configuration in your OT environment, be able to have access to a visual network topology to understand and contextualize information continuously, understanding your criticality, knowing where your mission critical assets are located, what are different layers of defense you have, and then be able to review periodically your access policies, changes made to your policies, and those communication flows that will put in context the different vulnerabilities that you can have. So with this, I'll be happy to answer questions either now or through the Slack channel. You can also email me directly. My email is there, robin@network-perception.com. And we have a portal website where you can create an account, take a closer look at NP Live and the other solution that we offer.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation, Robin. I don't see any questions currently up inside of Zoom or inside of Slack. There's been a little bit of conversations in your channel. But I do have one question for you. So I'm assuming that the presentations you showed with the network flows, that was screenshots from your tool or graphics from your tools?
Correct.
Excellent. Yeah, I just wanted to give you guys kudos. That's actually a very, very beautiful representation for network flows with all the pertinent information in there. So
thank you.
Yeah, I was really happy to see that. That was actually top notch. So
great. Thanks, Justin.
Hey, no problem. Thank you very much.